Hello and welcome to Lazada Insider, featuring knowledge that makes a difference. We share trusted insights, forward-looking perspectives, and exclusive expert interviews to keep you ahead of the curve. This series is brought to you by Lazada Group Strategy.
Hi, I'm your host Katrina, and welcome to another episode of Lazada Insider. If you enjoy this series, make sure to subscribe and follow this channel for more. Today we're going to discuss about the fashion industry. The fashion industry is going through large-scale changes as a result of the pandemic, technology development, and cultural shifts. And staying ahead of these changes and the future trends is an absolute must for businesses in Southeast Asia. And today we are very delighted to be joined by expert guest Roshan from Red Sear, one of the fastest growing companies in the internet advisory space. And he will be sharing with us his latest insights on the critical trends and opportunities in Southeast Asia fashion category. Roshan leads the Red Sear business in Southeast Asia, and he has more than 15 years of experience in investment advisory and consulting services. Hi, Roshan, welcome, and thank you for joining us today on Lazada Insider.
Good afternoon, Katrina. Very pleased to be part of this discussion.
Great to have you. You are the partner with Red Sear. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your position and what it entails.
Right. So I'm based here in Singapore, been here for almost 13 plus years. Briefly about Red Sear, we provide actionable insights on the new economy and digital sectors in South Asia, as well as the Middle East. We work with private equities and venture capital investors, as well as some of the leading companies that operate in these new economy sectors. Specific to my role at Red Sear, this is focused around business development work in Southeast Asia. Now, this involves everything from idea generation to team building to sales and marketing, as well as execution of the project.
What do you see are the major shifts that you have observed in the fashion industry in Southeast Asia?
Right. So if we were to break down fashion into a few categories, namely apparel, footwear, and accessories, we see quite a few interesting trends within these. I'll just give you a backdrop of what has happened last year, and then that will possibly give you a context of how we see things shaping up going forward.
Sure.
Now, for apparel, last year was fairly weak, and our sense is potentially the sector witnessed a high single-digit to low double-digit kind of year-on-year decline at a sector level at the apparel. Now, obviously, the reasons are around the mobility restrictions that we saw in most countries. And as people spent less time outside their homes, the demand for apparel was relatively muted for most part of the year. The good part, though, is towards the end of the last year, when mobility restrictions were being eased, we saw a bit of bounce back coming back in this sector. Now, within apparel, directionally, we think looking forward, formal and party wear categories could start seeing some sort of recovery around middle of 2021. And this will be driven by improved consumer demand as we expect the lockdowns to be progressively eased. And there are expectations that the various platforms, at least on the online side, will start offering various promotions. So these two factors, in our view, should trigger a bit of demand from the consumer side, and hence we expect the party and formal wear kind of segments to see a sort of good comeback towards middle of this year. Now, again, the context is fairly clear. Last year, these categories were under a lot of pressure. Moving on, if we look at two other categories, one is accessories and footwear. Interestingly, they didn't do well, but they were definitely much better off compared to fashion. And our estimate is these two categories saw anything in the range of high single digit to low double digit kind of growth for the whole of last year. And the biggest surprise perhaps was in athleisure and sportswear category. Here, as you can imagine, a lot of focus from consumers towards maintaining and taking care of their health. And so the segment saw very robust growth. And in specific countries, our view is the growth was in the range of triple digits year on year. So this was clearly one of the sort of strong categories for last year. And yeah, that kind of wraps up sort of quick view of where things were and how we see things shaping up ahead.
Yeah, great for sharing. Let's probably talk about, from a consumer perspective. Has consumers' demand and their journey of shopping for fashion category changed as well? And how can business adapt to these changes?
Right. Great question, Katrina, on that one. From a demand perspective, I would like to highlight 4 areas. And then after that, I'll come to the journey part. On the demand side, we see first sustainable fashion. What we saw was COVID had impacted the demand for categories seen as developing on the back of sustainability in a very positive way, and people were be that fashion or other categories looking out for products which were being developed and marketed as being sustainable and good for the ecosystem or ecology at large. So this was also visible in fashion, and what we noticed is this was applicable to fabrics that were used for fashion as well as apparel as a category. And interestingly, we started seeing these trends in the first quarter of 2020. And over the course of the year, we saw that the awareness levels about these sustainable categories, specifically in fashion, it kept building up over time. And so the interest level is there. And our view is this is not a one-off trend. This is going to be a long-term structural trend. And people are going to be looking out for products, specifically in fashion, which ensure that they sort of tie up well from the sustainability perspective. Within this, an interesting trend we have seen is the apparel that are made from blended fibers that has possibly seen more demand as compared to apparels made from purely natural fibers. Now, in a way, this kind of goes back to the overall theme of circular economy, wherein the products get reused in ways that go beyond the initial or first use case. So those are very positive trends, and all of it showing up under sustainable fashion. The second interesting trend is the willingness of mass market consumers to look beyond the premium or international brands. And this is great news for local brands because they are now willing to try local brands, which wasn't the case in the past. And we have also noticed that the small business sellers operating in fashion who have been able to position local brands appropriately with the help of various e-commerce platforms, they have been able to ride on this trend. And in some cases, there have been explicit call-outs by government as well as partnerships between e-commerce platforms and the various government bodies to sort of support the local small business owners. So that has also resonated well with consumers, and that seems to be a trend which is working well as well. The third part is around the demand for multi-purpose apparels and clothes. And essentially it means a product which can be used both for work purpose and possibly also for relaxation purpose. You don't necessarily have to change between them. And the nuanced finding there is people appreciate the fabrics from their comfort point of view and not just the fact that they are visually more appealing. So very interesting trend, as in people appreciating the functional aspect of the apparels and not just the looks of the products that they get to wear. And then a bit about the resiliency that we saw in accessories and athleisure categories. So this is something which possibly was very visible, I would say, from second quarter last week. While a lot of sellers focus on apparels, what we also saw is the sellers who were working on categories like accessories, they were able to do well because these were categories which are not affiliated with very well-known brands. So there is a pull for unbranded products as long as they meet the right sort of criteria, and slightly more resilient categories. So that has worked well with consumers as well. So just to quickly sum it up from a demand perspective, we see fairly high interest in sustainable fashion. willingness to work with local brands and use fashion for multi-purposes, not just for the look and feel, but also the functional aspects of that. And fourth aspect is looking beyond the apparel. There is a fair bit of demand for accessories and athleisure categories, and so sellers who have been able to cater to these changing habits and demands, they have been slightly better off compared to others. The other query you had about consumers' journey. So our simplistic take here is, while fashion over the last few years has moved as a key online category, there were lots of buyers who still prefer to use the offline channel and sometimes the omni-channel format. And over the last 12 months or so, we have noticed that many of these users have, either by choice or by force, have been moving to the online platforms. So that is a big shift which has happened, and a lot of that could be irreversible shift, because people are now comfortable choosing the products online, making the payments, and they're happy with the way the logistics support has worked out. So it's fairly convenient for them. So I think that offline part of the segment has slightly diminished in terms of the customer journey now, and it's more of online. But looking ahead, as let's say the constraints around mobility are addressed, possibly there will be an interest in going back to the offline channels to some extent, because there is still a bit of value, at least in some consumer cohorts, around the touch and feel of the fashion products before they actually buy one. So offline will definitely remain important, but progressively we see that a significant number of users, particularly the consumers in the millennials or Gen Z category, they are wanting to have online and omni-channel options for fashion purchase. So I think from a relative standing perspective, definitely the relevance of offline remains, but progressively various sellers, small businesses or large, they should definitely look out for various technological tools available out there, be that with e-commerce platforms or otherwise, and make use of these tools, because we see the category continuing to grow on the online platforms. I hope that gave you some color around how the journey and demand trends are evolving.
Yeah, and definitely excellent. But also when we talk about fashion category, it is in nature a long tail category with very intense competition. So how can small business owners really stand out from this kind of competition?
Great question, Katrina. And this is clearly something which should be on the minds of a lot of SMEs, and many of them operate in the fashion category. I'll just share a few points. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. The overriding or overarching theme is small business owners definitely need to be nimble, and it's actually something which could be their strength, unlike a large business where lots of things have to be bureaucratic. Potentially small business owners can be nimble, and keeping that in mind, a few things they could do differently from the large business owners perhaps. So first is definitely leverage the data and value-added services provided by e-commerce platforms such as yourself, Lazada. This, in our view, helps to understand the demand patterns in a better way, and that therein lies the value of working together with a platform. And these are demands that obviously have a local context, but also you can get a better feel of how trends are shaping up in the regional level. So business owners can use that to identify trends that could possibly be at play in their own geographies. And this has been kind of seen in other parts of the country or region. And essentially, it allows them to have the right product mix, right pricing mix, and they can go after targeted sales and minimize inventory risk. So the first point is essentially make use of the tools and data services, value-added data services that are available from the e-commerce platforms. Second is around specific to fashion, which is a highly seasonal category, and we noticed quite a few business owners struggle with managing logistics. And our assessment is while internal logistics can work well, it works well only to a certain extent. So it's definitely worthwhile exploring the option of fulfilling services being offered by platforms such as yourself, specifically around high demand periods, wherein you may not have the wherewithal to sort of take care of the increased logistics demand. And essentially, it sort of falls back into having a resilient supply chain network and better managing and planning of the logistics. And this can be a fairly big differentiator in our view between business owners who actually make use of it and essentially tap into the demand which is coming their way, or just not be able to service that. So that is where our view is, just reach out and then figure out the additional logistics capabilities or support that it's available out there. And just to sort of elaborate on this, this year, around second quarter, the Muslim festive period of Lebaran, that's where we expect fashion to see a seasonal a high kind of trend. And so business owners would do well to be prepared for online sales during this period. And they can definitely get into different discussions with the platforms beforehand and then be better prepared to meet that. The third aspect, I would say it's more of a selective use. This would be around live streaming and shoppertainment. Again, I use the word selective because not all small business owners may be positioned to use it. But when applicable, definitely explore the option. We have seen in some cases it has worked well for some of the business owners who have been able to push categories or products that has resonated well with consumers. So that would be option number 3. And fourth is, when feasible, again, while you have time, the semi-business owners should think about the omni-channel approach. This is essentially catering to the consumer cohort who still value the touch and feel aspect related to fashion. Of course, it's not relevant as long as the mobility restrictions are in place. But once that kind of gets sorted, maybe they should look at a mix of online with offline, which would be their existing facilities, and how they can sort of engage with customers along these multiple touch points. So those would be the 4 out of many potential options for small business owners to sort of stay ahead of the game in the fashion category.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all these advices. It is very useful for our small business owners. Last but not least, let's talk about future. Could you share your point of view on the future of fashion industry in Southeast Asia with us?
Another great question. So it will possibly involve a bit of recapping of what I've already said, but essentially, I would say in 3 big buckets. One is fashion going forward will be less about style statement per se. It will possibly be more about functional aspects. There is going to be a demand for local brands as long as they are catering to the functional aspect. Of course, you cannot completely discount the style side of the equation. That is relevant, but possibly less relevant than in the past. And it opens up the opportunity for local brands and small sellers to sort of gain traction with customers. Same time, have a diversity of products and not just limit to apparels. Look at the emerging trends, which would be, let's say, masks till the period we have this mobility restrictions and the pandemic is not under control. Accessories, which goes well with apparels, and athleisure or sportswear. So look at the product mix, be nimble, and be willing to sort of change the product mix as the sort of demand kind of changes. So that would be point 1. Second is just looking at the pattern or the kind of consumers on the online platform in the fashion category. Our view is it's dominated by females in the millennials and Gen Z category. They're possibly the largest buyers out there. Of course, there would be males and coming in from other age group categories also. But bulk of these fashion-focused buyers are in the mid-20s to early 30s age group. So whatever sort of initiatives are put in place by the e-commerce platforms focused on fashion, as well as the sellers and business owners, they should be mindful of this age group and then sort of curate their products which would be appealing to these age group. And as I mentioned again, the sustainability aspects of the products being sold will be very important. And what is seen in early stages in, let's say, Europe and other countries is the appeal of pre-used or pre-loved luxury products or fashion products, which are now finding acceptance by a lot of consumers. Obviously, possibly somewhere down the line, Southeast Asia would also be ready for that kind of product category, wherein people are okay to sort of purchase luxury products at a lower price point, but these are products essentially which have been used in the past. So that is something to look out for. So sustainability will be a big theme to look out for going forward. And then third part is more to do with the current macroeconomic outlook, which is broadly modest, I would say. So keeping that in mind, the mass market level, the appeal or the attraction for products will be in the value category. And as I mentioned, the premium category will possibly be there. It will be resilient, but it's not going to be very, very appealing to the mass market. And so for the next few quarters, small business owners and sellers could possibly focus on providing products which are perceived to offer good value for money. So that would be the sort of three key takeaways as we look ahead for fashion industry.
Thank you. Very insightful. Thank you. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much, Roshan, for the great sharing with us.
Great, Katrina. Good speaking to you. And thank you once again for the opportunity.
This is Lazada Insider, brought to you by Lazada Group Strategy. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you click follow and subscribe so you don't miss our latest insights and expert interviews. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, take care.